New York scenes. At this time, my mother was living alone in a little apartment in Jamaica, Long Island, working in the shoe factory, waiting for me to come home so I could keep her company and escort her to Radio City once a month. She had a tiny bedroom waiting for me, clean linen in the dresser, clean sheets in the bed. It was a relief after all the sleeping bags and bunks and railroad earth. It was another of the many opportunities she's given me all her life to just stay at home and write. I always give her all my leftover pay. I settled down to long, sweet sleeps, day-long meditations in the house, writing, and long walks around beloved old Manhattan, a half-hour subway ride away. I roamed the streets, the bridges, Times Square, cafeterias, the waterfront. I looked up all my poet beatnik friends and roamed with them. I had love affairs with girls in the village. I did everything with that great mad joy you get when you return to New York City. I've heard great singing Negroes call it the apple. There now is your insular city of the Mahatos, belted round by wharves, sang Herman Melville. Bound round by flashing tides, sang Thomas Wolfe. Whole panoramas of New York everywhere, from New Jersey, from skyscrapers, even from bars, like a Third Avenue bar. 4 a.m. The men are all roaring in clink-bonk glass brassfoot bar rail. Where are you going? Excitement. October's in the air and the Indian summer sun of door. 2 Madison Avenue salesmen who've been working all day long come in young, well-dressed, just suits, puffing cigars, glad to have the day done and the drink coming in. Side by side, march in, smiling, but there's no room at the roaring, crowded bar, so they stand too deep from it, waiting and smiling and talking. Men do love bars, and good bars should be loved. It's full of businessmen, workmen, Finn McCools of time, be-overalled old gray toppers dirty and beer-swinging glad, nameless truck bus drivers with flashlights slung from hips, old beet-faced beer swallowers sadly upraising purple lips to happy drinking ceilings. Bartenders are fast, courteous, interested in their work as well as clientele, like Dublin at 4:30 p.m. when the work is done. But this is great New York 3rd Avenue. Free lunch smells of Moody Street exhaust, river lunch, and road of grime. By smashing the door, guitar playing, long sideburn heroes smell out there on wood doorsteps of afternoon drowse. But it's New York's towers rise beyond, voices crash mangled to talk and chew the gossip till ear wicker drops his load. Ah, Jack Fitzgerald, Mighty Murphy, where are you? Semi-bald, blue shirt, tattered shovelers in broken end dungarees, fisting glasses of glistening glass, foam-topped brown afternoon beer. The subway rumbles underneath as man in Homburg, in vest but coatless, executive changes from right to left foot on ye brass rail. Colored man in hat, dignified, young, paper under arm, says goodbye at warm bar. And paternal leaning over men, elevator operator round the corner. And wasn't this where they say Novak, the real estater who used to stay up late at nights, line-faced to become right and rich in his little white warm cellule of the night, typing up reports and letters, wife and kids go mad at home at 11 p.m. Ambitious, worried, in a little office of the island, right on the street, undignified, but open to all business in an infancy. Any business can be small as ambition's big. Pushing how many daisies now? And never made his million. Never had a drink with so long Gigi. And I love you too in this late afternoon beer room of men excited, shifting stools and foot-bottom rail scuffle heel soles in New York. Never called old glasses over and offered him rim, red nose a drink. Never laughed and let the fly his nose use as a landing mark, but ulcerated in the middle of the night to be rich and get his family the best. So the best American sods his blanket now, made in upper mills of Hudson Bay, moon-faced Sassenach, and carted down by house painter in white coveralls. silent, to rim the roam of his once formed flesh, and let worms rim. So have another beer, toppers, bloody mugglers, lovers. My friends and I in New York City have our own special way of having fun without having to spend much money, and most important of all, without having to be importuned by formalistic bores, such as, say, a swell evening at the mayor's ball. We don't have to shake hands and we don't have to make appointments, and we feel all right. We sort of wander around like children. We walk into parties and tell everybody what we've been doing, and people think we're showing off. They say, "Oh, look at the beatniks." Take, for example, this typical evening you can have. Emerging from the 7th Avenue subway on 42nd Street, you pass the John, which is the beatest John in New York. You can never tell if it's open or not. Usually there's a big chain in front of it saying it's out of order, or else it's got some white-haired decaying monster slinking outside. A John which all 7 million people in New York City have at one time passed and taken strange notice of. Past the new charcoal fried hamburger stand, Bible booths, operatic jukeboxes, and a seedy underground used magazine store next to a peanut brittle store smelling of Subway arcades. Here and there, a used copy of that old Bard Plotinus sneaked in with the remainders of collections of German high school textbooks, where they sell long, ratty-looking hot dogs. No, actually, they're quite beautiful, particularly if you haven't got 15 cents and are looking for someone in Bickford's cafeteria who can lay some smash on you, lend you some change. Coming up that stairway, people stand there for hours and hours drooling in the rain with soaking wet umbrellas. Lots of boys in dungarees, scared to go into the army, standing halfway up the stairway on the iron steps waiting for God who knows what. Certainly among them some romantic heroes just in from Oklahoma with ambitions to end up yearning in the arms of some unpredictable sexy young blonde in a penthouse on Empire State Building. Some of them probably stand there dreaming of owning the Empire State Building by virtue of a magic spell which they've dreamed up by a creek in the backwoods of a ratty old house on the outskirts of Texarkana. Ashamed of being seen going into the dirty movie, what's its name? Across the street from the New York Times, the lion and the tiger passing, as Tom Wolfe used to say about certain types passing that corner. Leaning against that cigar store with a lot of telephone booths on the corner of 42nd and 17th and 7th, where you make beautiful telephone calls looking out into the street, and it gets real cozy in there when it's raining outside and you like to prolong the conversation. Who do you find? Basketball teams, basketball coaches, all those guys from the roller skating rink go there. Cats from the Bronx again, looking for some action, really looking for romance. Strange duos of girls coming out of dirty movies. Did you ever see them? Or bemused drunken businessmen with their hats tipped awry on their graying heads, staring cataconically upward at the signs floating by on the Times building. Huge sentences about Khrushchev, railing by the populations of Asia enumerated in flashing light bulbs, always 500 periods after each sentence. Suddenly, a psychopathetically worried policeman appears on the corner and tells everybody to go away. This is the center of the greatest city the world has ever known, and this is what beatniks do here. Standing on the street corner waiting for no one is power, saith poet Gregory Corso. Instead of going to nightclubs, if you're in a position to make the nightclub scene, most beatniks rattle empty pockets passing birdland. How strange to stand on the sidewalk and just watch that weird eccentric from New York, from 2nd Avenue looking like Napoleon going by feeling cookie crumbs in his pocket, or a young 15-year-old kid with a bratty face, or suddenly somebody swishing by in a baseball hat, because that's what you see. And finally an old lady dressed in 7 hats and a long ratty fur coat in the middle of July night, carrying a huge Russian woolen purse filled with scribbled bits of paper which say, Festival Foundation ink, 70,000 germs and moths flying out of her sleeve. She rushes by and importunes shriners and duffel bag soldiers without a war, harmonica players off freight trains. Of course, they're the normal New York, looking ridiculously out of place and as odd as their own neat oddity, carrying pizzas and daily newses and headed for brown basements or Pennsylvania trains. W.H. Auden himself may be seen fumbling by in the rain. Paul Bowles, natty in a Dacron suit, passing through on a trip from Morocco. The ghost of Herman Melville himself, followed by Bartleby, the Wall Street scrivener, and Pierre, the ambiguous hipster of 1848, out on a walk. To see what's up in the news flashes of the times, let's go back to the corner newsstand. Space blast. Pope washes feet of poor. Let's go across the street to Grant's, our favorite dining place. For 65 cents, you could get a huge plate of fried clams, a lot of French fried potatoes, a little portion of coleslaw, some tartar sauce, a little cup of red sauce for fish, a slice of lemon, 2 slices of fresh rye bread, a pat of butter. Another 10 cents brings a glass of rare birch beer. What a ball it is to eat here. Migrations of Spaniards chewing on hot dogs, standing up, leaning against big pots of mustard. 10 different counters with different specialties. 10-cent cheese sandwiches, 2 liquor bars for the apocalypse. Oh yeah, and great and different bartenders. And cops that stand in the back getting free meals. Drunken saxophone players on the nod. Lonely, dignified rag pickers from Hudson Street supping soup without a word to anybody with black fingers. Whoa. 20,000 customers a day, 50,000 on rainy days, 100,000 on snowy days. Operation 24 hours a night. Privacy supreme under a glary red light full of conversation. Toulouse-Lautrec with his deformity and cane sketching in the corner. You can stay there for 5 minutes and gobble up your food, or else stay there for hours having insane philosophical conversation with your buddy and wondering about the people. Let's have a hot dog before we go to the movie. And you get so high in there you never get to the movies because it's better than a show about Doris Day on a holiday in the Caribbean. But what are we going to do tonight? Marty would go to a movie, but we're going to connect for some junk. Let's go down to the automat. Just a minute. I've got to shine my shoes on top of a fire hydrant. You want to see yourself in the fun mirror? Want to take 4 pictures for a quarter? Because we're on the eternal scene. We can look at the picture and remember it when we're wise old white-haired Thoros in cabins. Ah, the fun mirrors are gone. They used to have fun mirrors here. How about the Laugh movie? That's gone too. They got the flea circus. They still got dancing girls. The burlesque is gone millions and millions of years ago. Shall we go down by the automat and watch the old ladies eating beans, or the deaf mutes that stand in front of the window there, and you watch them and try to figure the invisible language as it flees across the window from face to face and finger to finger? Why does Times Square feel like a big room? Across the street is Bickford's, right in the middle of the block under the Apollo Theater marquee, and right there, next door to a little bookshop that specializes in Havelock Ellis and Rabelais, with thousands of sex fiends leafing at the bins. Bickford's is the greatest stage on Times Square. Many people have hung around there for years, man, and boys searching God alone knows for what. Maybe some angel of Times Square who would make the whole big room home, the old homestead. Civilization needs it. What's Times Square doing there anyway? I might as well enjoy it. Greatest city in the world has ever seen. Have they got a Times Square on Mars? What would the Blob do on Times Square? Or St. Francis? A girl gets off a bus in the Port Authority terminal and goes into Bickford's. Chinese girl, red shoes, sits down with coffee looking for daddy. There's a whole floating population around Times Square that has always made Bickford's their headquarters day and night. In the old days of the Beat Generation, some poets used to go in there to meet the famous character Honky, who used to come in and out in an oversized black raincoat and a cigarette holder, looking for somebody to lay a pawn ticket on. Remington typewriter, portable radio, black raincoat, to score for some toast, get some money, so he can go uptown and get in trouble with the cops or any of his boys. Also, a lot of stupid gangsters from 8th Avenue used to cut in. Maybe they still do. The ones from the early days are all in jail or dead. Now the poets just go there and smoke a peace pipe, looking for the ghost of Honky or his boys, and dream over the fading cups of tea. The beatniks make the point that if you went there every night and stayed there, you could start a whole Dostoevsky season on Times Square by yourself and meet all the midnight newspaper peddlers and their involvements in families and woes, religious fanatics who would take you home and give you long sermons over the kitchen table about the new apocalypse and similar ideas. My Baptist minister back in Winston-Salem told me the reason that God invented television was that when Christ comes back to earth again, they shall crucify him right on the streets of this here Babylon, and they're going to have television cameras pointing down on that spot, and the streets shall run with blood, and every eye shall see. Still hungry? Go out down to the Oriental Cafeteria, favorite dining spot also. Some nightlife, cheap, down in the basement across the street from the Port Authority Monolith bus terminal on 40th Street, and eat big oily lamb's heads with Greek rice for 90 cents. Oriental zigzag tunes on the jukebox. Depends how high you are by now, assuming you've picked up on one of the corners, say 42nd Street and 8th Avenue, near the Great Whelan's drugstore, another lonely haunt spot where you can meet people, Negro whores, ladies limping in a Benzedrine psychosis. Across the street, you can see the ruins of New York already started. The Globe Hotel being torn down there. An empty tooth hole right on 44th Street. And the Green McGraw building gaping up in the sky, higher than you'd believe, lonely all by itself down towards the Hudson River, where freighters wait in the rain for their Montevideo limestone. Might as well go on home. It's getting old. Or let's make the Village, or go to the Lower East Side and play Symphony Sid on the radio, or play our Indian records and eat big dead Puerto Rican steaks or lung steak stew. See if Bruno has slashed any more car roofs in Brooklyn. Though Bruno's gentled now, maybe he's written a new poem. Or look at television, nightlife, Oscar Levant talking about his melancholia on the Jack Parr show. The 5 spot on 5th Street in Bowery sometimes features Thelonious Monk on the piano, and you go on there. If you know the proprietor, you sit down at the table free with a beer. But if you don't know him, you can sneak in and stand by the ventilator and listen. Always crowded weekends. Monk cogitates with deadly abstraction, clonks, and makes a statement. Huge foot beating delicately on the floor, head turned to one side listening, entering the piano. Lester Brown played there just before he died, and he used to sit in the back kitchen between sets. My buddy poet Allen Ginsberg went back and got on his knees and asked him what he would do if an atom bomb fell on New York. Lester said he would break the window in Tiffany's and get some jewels anyway. He also said, "What are you doing on your knees?" Not realizing he's a great hero of the Beat Generation and now enshrined. The 5 spot is darkly lit, has weird waiters, good music always. Sometimes John Coltrane showers his rough notes from his big tenor horn all over the place. On weekends, parties of well-dressed uptowners jam-packed the place, talking continuously. Nobody minds. Oh, for a couple of hours, though, in the Egyptian gardens in the Lower West Side, Chelsea district of Greek restaurants, glasses of ouzo, Greek liqueur, and beautiful girls dancing the belly dance in spangles and beaded bras, the incomparable Zara on the floor and weaving like mystery to the flutes and ting-tang beats of Greece. When she's not dancing, she sits in the orchestra with the man clapping a drum against her belly, dreams in her eyes. Huge crowds of what appear to be suburbia couples sit at the tables, clapping to the swaying oriental idea. If you're late, you have to stand along the wall. Want to dance? The Garden Bar on 3rd Avenue, where you can do fantastic sprawling dances in the dim back room to a jukebox. Cheap. The waiter doesn't care. Wanna just talk? The Cedar Bar on University Place, where all the painters hang out, and a 16-year-old kid who was there one afternoon squirting red wine out of a Spanish wine skin into his friends' mouths and kept missing. The nightclubs of Greenwich Village, known as the Half Note, the Village Vanguard, the Café Bohemia, the Village Gate also feature jazz, Lee Konitz, J.J. Johnson, Miles Davis. But you've got to have mucho money. It's not so much that you gotta have too mucho money, but the sad commercial atmosphere is killing jazz, and jazz is killing itself there because jazz belongs to open, joyful 10-cent beer joints, as in the beginning. There's a big party at some painter's loft, wild, loud flamenco on the phonograph. The girls suddenly become all hips and heels, and people try to dance between their flying hair. Men go mad and start tackling people. Flying wedges hurtle across the room. Men grab men from the knees and lift them 9 feet from the floor and lose their balance, and nobody gets hurt. Blanc. Girls are balanced, hands on men's knees, their skirts falling and revealing frills on their thighs. Finally, everybody dresses to go home, and the host says dazzledly, "You all look so respectable." Or somebody just had an opening, or there's a poetry reading at the Living Theater, or at the Gaslight Cafe, or at the Seven Arts Coffee Gallery, up around Times Square, 9th Avenue and 43rd Street. Amazing spot. Begins at midnight Fridays, where afterwards everybody rushes out to the old wild bar. Or else a huge party at Leroy Jones. He's got a new issue of Eugen magazine, which he printed himself on a little cranky machine, and everybody's poems are in it, from San Francisco to Gloucester, Mass., and costs only 50 cents. Historic publisher, secret hipster of the trade. Leroy's getting sick of parties. Everyone's always taking off his shirt and dancing. 3 sentimental girls are crooning over poet Raymond Bremser. My buddy Gregory Corso is arguing with the New York Post reporter, saying, "But you don't understand, Kangaroonian, weep, forsake thy trade, flee to the Echinadian islands. Let's get out of here, it's too literary. Let's go get drunk on the Bowery or eat those long noodles and tea in glasses at Hong Pat's in Chinatown. What are we always eating for? Let's walk over the Brooklyn Bridge and build up another appetite. How about some okra on Sand Street? Shades of Hart Crane. Let's go see if we can find Don Joseph." Who's Don Joseph? Don Joseph is a terrific cornet player who wanders around the village with his little mustache and his arms hanging at the sides with the cornet, which creaks when he plays softly, nay whispers, the greatest, sweetest cornet since Bix and more. He stands at the jukebox in the bar and plays with the music for a beer. He looks like a handsome movie actor. He's the great, super glamorous secret Bobby Hackett of the jazz world. What about the guy Tony Fruscella, who sits cross-legged on the rug and plays back on his trumpet by ear, and later on at night there he is blowing with the guys at a session, modern jazz? Or George Jones, the secret Bowery shroud who plays great tenor in parks at dawn with Charlie Mariano for kicks because they love jazz. And that time on the waterfront at dawn, they played a whole session as the guy beat on the dock with a stick for the beat. Talking of Bowery shrouds, what about Charlie Mills walking down the street with bums drinking his bottle of wine, singing his 12-tone scale? Let's go see the strange, great secret painters of America and discuss their paintings and their visions with them. Iris Brody with her delicate fawn, Byzantine filigree of virgins. Or Miles Forst and his black bull in the orange cave. Or Franz Klein and his spiderwebs, his bloody spiderwebs. Or Wilhelm de Kooning and his white. Or Robert De Niro. Or Dodie Muller and her enunciations in 7 feet tall flowers. Or Al Leslie and his giant feet canvases. Ah, Leslie's giant is sleeping in the Paramount building. There's another great painter. His name is Bill Hine. He's really a secret subterranean painter who sits with all those weird new cats in the East 10th Street coffee shops that don't look coffee shops at all, but like sort of Henry Street basement secondhand clothes store, except you see an African sculpture or maybe a Mary Frank sculpture over the door, and inside they play Frescobaldi on the hi-fi. Let's go back to the village and stand on the corner of 8th Street and 6th Avenue and watch the intellectuals go by. AP reporters lurching home to their basement apartments on Washington Square. Lady editorialists with huge German police dogs breaking their chains. Lonely dykes melting by. Unknown experts on Sherlock Holmes with blue fingernails going up their rooms to take scopolamine. A muscle-bound young man in a cheap gray German suit explaining something weird to his fat girlfriend. Great editors leaning politely at the newsstand, buying the early edition of the Times. Great fat furniture movers out of 1910 Charlie Chaplin films coming home with great bags full of chop suey, feeding everybody. Picasso's melancholy harlequin, now owner of a print and frame shop, musing on his wife and newborn child, lifting up his finger for a taxi. Roly-poly recording engineers, Russian fur hats. Girl artists down from Columbia with D.H. Lawrence problems, picking up 50-year-old men, old men in the kettle of fish, and the melancholy specter of New York women's prison that looms high and is folded in silence as the night itself. At sunset, their windows look like oranges. Poet E.E. Cummings buying a package of cough drops in the shade of the monstrosity. If it's raining, you can stand under the awning in front of Howard Johnson's and watch the street from the other side. Beatnik Angel Peter Orlovsky in the supermarket 5 doors away buying Unida biscuits, late Friday night, ice cream, caviar, bacon, pretzels, soda pop, TV guide, Vaseline, 3 toothbrushes, chocolate milk, dreaming of roast suckling pig, buying whole Idaho potatoes, raisin bread, wormy cabbage by mistake, and fresh felt tomatoes, and collecting purple stamps. Then he goes home broke and dumps it all on the table, takes out a big book of Mayakovsky's poems, turns on the 1949 television set to the horror movie, and goes to sleep. And this is the beat night life of New York.